Hey, what is up, everyone? It's Rich. All right, welcome to a video. This is a Patreon lesson, actually, and a good friend of mine, Jackson Taylor. We've known each other for probably about 5 years now. Went for the $50 lesson tier, but he wants to approach it in a different way. Generally, a lesson would be I look at your work and we come up with a curriculum based on your goals. Jackson's already kind of moving along with his work. He does comic book art and he also does illustration. And he wanted me to go over Franklin Booth. So I love Franklin Booth. These books are fantastic. I believe that this one is actually fairly rare. Not rare, but expensive. However you want to look at it. I mean, it's like out of print and a little hard to find. So this one I think is pretty pricey. This one I think you can get. Both are fantastic. This one has color pieces in it. And Booth's color work is fantastic. So without any further ado, let's get to this. We'll start with this book, and this will be about a 30-minute video. So you settle in, grab yourself a beverage of some sort, or pick up your pencil. Well, you should watch this because you want to see the art. And let's do it. Right, let's go. Let me move this one book. I'm going to pause this for 1 sec. Okay. So, yeah, Franklin Booth is a pen and ink artist, full-on illustrator. His work is absolutely beautiful. I think a lot of people focus on the detail and rendering of Franklin Booth, but in my opinion, not only is he fantastic at that, he's actually just a great artist in general. His ideas are fantastic. His compositions are great, and he just draws cool-looking stuff. On top of the fact that it's rendered beautifully. What else was I going to say? His work has been highly influential in our field, aka comics. One person obviously would be Bernie Wrightson, and it's not just the fact that this stuff is super detailed. People lock into that. It's like, oh, it's pen and ink and it's detailed, and they start kind of making connections. But I mean, this is a legitimate influence of Wrightson. And sometimes, like there's, Virgil Finlay, and there's Gustav Dorr, and there's Joseph Clement Cole, and there's a body of artists that have done work like this. And it doesn't necessarily mean because you draw like this that you're influenced by him. Frank Cho, the current stuff that Mark Silvestri is doing is 100% influenced by this work. Frazetta, his Canaveral prints are like it. And in fact, it was funny, I'd shot a scrapped version of this video 2 days ago, and I had mentioned that my suspicions were that Roy Krinkle probably turned Wrightson onto a lot of his influences, because Krinkle was a real student of art, as was Frazetta. But it was ironic that in the other book, Krinkle actually did the foreword, and I didn't know that when I actually went through the book, but it kind of validated my sort of speculation on that, because Frazetta and Roy Krinkle were real good friends. And Roy Krinkle was an illustrator who was not only friends with Frazetta, but really kind of helped him get into the book cover illustration field. So this looks like an early piece. Jackson, what we'll do is, this will just be like a nice sort of deep dive into Booth's work, and then I'll break down some of the techniques and sort of theories behind some of the stuff that he does. I wish that some of these books actually had, what would you call it, examples of unfinished pieces. Like, I'm a big fan of Maxfield Parrish, and there's a couple examples where you can see, there's one in particular that has been in a few of the books. It's an unfinished piece, and it's very, very fascinating to see the actual process, meaning just even a glimpse into a piece that isn't like just completely like it, 5 million% of completion. And the same with Booth. It's like, were there studies for these pieces? Were these penciled out? What was the process? There's definitely pieces that were photo referenced, but there's a lot that aren't, or at least they're creatively compiled, with reference and fantasy, just drawing out of your head. The other book, you could kind of see examples of stuff. It's like, shoot, do I have an artist in here? What is his name? I'll think of it in a second. There's a painter that I'm a big fan of, and he got really into photography with his art. He's a fantastic artist just in general. I'm going to pause and just get his name really quick. Dang, I can't think of his name. I'll after the video I'll get it and I'll put it in the comments section below. But anyway, you know, these artists definitely use reference because of the level of realism. We'll just get past these. These are just little I thought it was different pieces. It's, you know, when I'm filming with a camera, I'm not as focused on the image as just getting stuff in frame. One of the keys to this style, although this piece wouldn't be a great representation of it, is definitely the direction that you place your lines will create different patterns. I mean, it's I'm stating the obvious, but some of his pieces, the line work all goes the same direction, and then what it is the thickness of the line will indicate things. But what you'll find is generally he doesn't draw out things literally. Most of the lines and holding lines that you see are based on interconnecting and gaps between lines. So if you look at this arm, sorry, my phone, do you see her arm, how there's no closed line? So he never really put a border around it, but the darkness of his jacket creates it instead. So if you start delineating things, meaning like outlining things, you're kind of doing the style wrong to some extent. But as you can see, the clouds, he did do it, but you know, some of the other pieces, he avoids that. This is pretty incredible. My camera goes a little crazy trying to shoot this stuff because it's like it doesn't know what to focus in on, so we'll do our best. But you can see like a lot of these lines are straight, but there's like hatches in here. And again, I mean, it's like, I know that the reason that people dissect this guy's stuff is a lot of times just for the like line quality and effects that he gets. There is a lot more to it, though. He's just a great artist, as I said before, so. The one thing that I've always found with this style of art is that faces are real difficult to do. I've talked about it in other videos, but generally speaking, if you start to render the shit out of faces, they can really look weird fast. And if you start creating planes that don't exist on the face, or you don't really understand the planes, you'll create a lot of like conflicting sort of visual cues that the reader will go, that face looks weird. They may not know why, but it's like, you can goof it pretty hard. So you know, it would behoove you to probably use reference at first if you don't really understand how to like light a face, you know, and then try to create shadows with the lines. Value, you know, different shadows doesn't necessarily mean black. It just means levels of gray, like in this piece. In terms of the different directions that he sends lines, I mean, occasionally you'll just see like a patch of lines that go like a completely different direction. I'll point it out when I see it. Wrightson does it too. It's just probably an arbitrary sort of visual thing that they saw in the sketch that makes them kind of want to just keep it in the piece. You can see him a little bit there. But these are hard to shoot because this stuff is very, very small and they're just borders. And one recommendation I made in the scrap video was if you're really interested in doing some pieces like this, I would start out very, very small and, you know, maybe just try like a little spot illustration like this. Or, you know, even this might be biting off a little more than you could chew. It just depends on where you're at with like your skills and also your tenacity. I mean, it's just... you kind of like, I'm not saying that you have to have this in you to do it, but you sort of do. There's a level of like psychosis that you kind of need to have to be able to really follow through with pieces like this. Not everyone has it in them. It's just one of those things. But you can always use elements of this to sort of spice up your work. That's really cool. Yeah, I mean, it's how I got turned on to Franklin Booth was twofold. One was in, I think, the Wrightson Frankenstein book. They made a reference to it. So that kind of put it on my radar. And then Tom McWeeny, who worked at Wildstorm, he was the Joe Madureira's inker. And he's also a really, really good artist in his own right. He had an old book of Franklin Booth stuff, and he brought it in and made copies of the whole book. I don't know if maybe someone loaned it to him, and then he made me a set of copies. So my first actual sort of quote-unquote book the Franklin Booth stuff was just probably like 70 or 80 photocopies of this stuff. But I just really, really liked it. I liked how it looked, and this is cool looking stuff. Well, here we go. This is like a pencil drawing. So it's possible that maybe he did drawings like this. Like this might have been like how the underdrawings looked, is that they were kind of like shaded pencil, and then he would use that as sort of the value study. Now he may have set it up then like a painter and actually gone to the board with like like the grid pattern. There was a lot of ways that these guys transferred images to their boards if they were going to use reference, and that could mean that their own reference. Yeah, this is really interesting. Okay, I didn't remember these. This is great. Well, there you go. So he did like value pencil or charcoal, whatever this is, things. That makes sense. And then he just went, crazy with the like line work. But you could see, like, do you see these like little patterns of like weird directional lines? I did this. There's a Lanil U Red Skull piece. You could probably Google it and find a scan of it that I did. And actually one of my patrons owns it. But I did the same thing. Lanil had done this value pencil drawing of Red Skull, and it was just meant to be colored digitally without ever being inked. And I did it as like a demo. And I did the same thing. Anywhere that I saw little anomalies with the pencils that I thought looked cool, I just kept them in, and scribbled it out like it was meant to be. And if you do it with enough confidence and you have sort of a skill set behind it, it looks believable. It's like you own it and you put it down and you go, this is how it is. Sweet notes and sour notes, like this stuff. It doesn't mean anything. It just looks cool. He's great with folds too. Like, and it's crazy like that he renders them this way, because again, it can really, really send some weird mixed signals if you start sending your lines in inappropriate directions. So you really have to understand form with this stuff. This book has more trees and like landscapes than the other one. This is nice. And you can notice like his line weights get thicker here, and it creates that deeper value. And then these are hatches, like there's lines going multiple directions. He's got them. Let me grab a pencil and I can show you. I did this kind of in the other video too, but like his lines go this way and possibly this way, and it just creates those little grid patterns. You can just try it. You just need to move your cross hatching in very, very tight, and you start to get these reverse whites. And it can even create that dotted effect. I don't know if you've ever seen that in black. Some people will go in and sort of do it after the effect. Let's see. This book is pretty big, actually. This stuff. Though that's not a great example of what I'm talking about, but you'll see like if he does a dark sky with like the dotted like white effect, they could potentially be hatches that just are leaving little whites in the middle. So the page is a little hard to turn. More and more trees. It's time-consuming stuff, man. It's a war of inches. When I was doing my black drawings and I did some of the pieces, I mean, literally, you just you spend. I'm not even exaggerating when I say this. It's like, sometimes like a little area like this could take an hour. I'm not saying that this took him an hour, but you get into stuff like this and you're really drawing real stuff. Leaves can be a little more forgiving. You can kind of pepper them in faster, but you start getting into some of the stuff where it actually really matters and people are going to be paying attention to what exactly you drew there. It literally is a war of inches, and you just kind of like, it's like you're getting paid by the square inch. I don't mean that you're doing it for money, but it's like that's what the result will be. This is nice. Yeah, you can see them here. You see these little things, but those are hatches that are leaving those white dots. That's really cool effect. I would assume that the line, like what it is the lines are thicker down here. He may have even done it with a brush. It's possible that some of this is pen and ink or a thicker pen. Like I said, there's always people in the comments section that are more experts on this than me. You can see it here, like how he's building it up. And you can see the directions of the lines if you actually really look. The black lines, you just have to really look for them. But he's got, but they are thicker, but he's got lines going this direction, and those create those hatches. But it's the thickness of them, and then they're layered in. So there's a patch here, there's a patch here, there's a patch here, and they rotate a little bit. This is a different direction. And you just have to experiment with it. A lot of it is just improv for him. Again, he knows the level of gray he wants, the value of gray. And so within that, he's able to create these just incredible patterns. Oh, and there's a couple of people that I follow on Instagram that I would recommend. Hyper Mirage is one. If you don't follow Hyper Mirage, I would highly recommend their page. They do work like this beautiful, beautiful stuff. And then obviously Alberto Veranda, who we looked at his book. So they're carrying the torch of this a little bit too. Hyper Mirage to me is a little more like this. Like I think Alberto has elements of this for sure, but his stuff is a little more contemporary, and it's not as kind of old school, I guess you call it, like sticking more to the tradition of exactly how this stuff is produced. His stuff has multiple sort of like line approaches. This is great right here. I love the lightness of those tree branches. This is unusual for him to do solid black. In fact, you don't see a lot of that on his pieces. Usually the black is rendered to black. God, man, this one on the next page is so killer. Some other artists you may want to check out if you like this kind of stuff. They don't really do the rendering like this, but Kay Nielsen and then also John Bauer are two illustrators that come to mind that actually do really, really like beautiful illustrated stuff. Those almost look like comic book heads. It's funny. It's like I've seen people on Gen 13 draw faces like this guy right here in the foreground. It looks like the Joker. This is interesting. That would be a pain in the ass to do, man. If he didn't do that with white, oh my gosh. I've had stuff in my black drawings where I had some really, really fine tree branches that had these little whites, and kind of my rule book for the black drawings was to use no white paint. And even for me, there was a point on this one where it was just too psycho to try to work around it, and I had to use a little bit of white for some of the little tiny thinnest tree branches, because it's just like I'd already dug in so far on that. And you know, I would even do skies and stuff like this where it's just the white of the paper showing through. But yeah, there was just some stuff with the tree branches that I couldn't really justify spending that much time for little twigs that were hanging off of it. So I suck. No. I don't even know why I came up with that concept. I had all these sort of like things where I was like, it's got to be like this. You can't use this. You can't use this. You can't use this. No Copics, no pencil shading. I want it only to be line work, or I use stipple, but I use stipple as a blending tool at times, and for a different effect. Like if you needed misty water and stuff like that, it seemed to work well. It's nice. Yep, really, really good stuff. This is nice. We're only 20 minutes into this video. We're kicking ass. I think because I shot that dry run. Man, that is so crazy. Oh my gosh. The fact that it's kind of readable is pretty insane, because that's not easy to do. But again, it's because the direction of these roses or whatever, flowers, go different directions. It kind of breaks it up a little bit where you can then sort of spot the other stuff. Look at these little straight up and down lines running through here. It's pretty nuts. Yeah, I mean, oh, here we go. Let's see this. Some of my inking demo videos, I show stuff like this, so you should definitely refer to those. Just like search my channel for inking, and you'll find like some of my basics of inking, and you can get really the kind of core techniques that'll help you make effects like this. This guy was on another level, man. It really just it's really apparent when you go through the two books. This dude was a baller. But I see, and here you go. Here's another one of these like pencil drawings. You can see how detailed his pencils were. This stuff doesn't look like Travis, but this is kind of how sort of crazy Travis was. Is that Travis would work a drawing 3 times through because he would do super duper tight pencils when he would ink himself, and then he would ink it, and then he would do the ink wash, and then if he was coloring it like on the Metabaron book, I mean, you're talking about 3 to 4 passes of just really really intense detail. But you know, this is so kick-ass. Man, I don't even remember this piece. This is great. Check this out. And this almost looks like Mobius type stuff. It's funny. I don't know if it's the panel borders or whatever, but they're a little more simplistic. But again, this would be a good way to warm up with stuff like this. It's just maybe take like a photograph and see if you can kind of like come up with a little value study of it with like line work. Something like this. This would be perfect. Get a picture of an old fashioned telephone and see if you can like draw it and sort of decide where you would put your rendering lines and what direction that they would go. This is nice. Really, really curious to see that Mark Silvestri book that he's been working on. I believe it's Batman. I'm pretty sure it is. I think he's even said that it is. But yeah, I mean, he's been working on that for a few years. Honestly, probably 4 or 5 years now. Better be good. This better be his Wrightson moment. And I would assume if he's spending as much time as he has on it, that although the first version of it may come out in color, I think at some point DC will probably print it in black and white. So it should be pretty interesting. This is nice. This is really beautiful, actually. It's cool. And again, those different shapes of the wings and stuff like that, and the directions that the lines go, really, really make it nice. A nice effect running through here. And then if you see again, what makes these blend into the background is that the value of these, even though the directions go a little differently, they still sort of mix in with this. The edges are what's making this stuff pop, but the thickness of the lines overall is about the same. But if he went and accidentally threw in a set of lines that were a little heavier, I'm seeing, well, I mean, up here it gets darker, but it's more intentional. But yeah, that's where you can get problematic, because you don't want to have mixed values running through something that really is supposed to set back behind everything, and then these little figures are supposed to pop. These curtains are fantastic too. Beautiful folds and then beautiful detail on it, and this little painting in the background is great. So what do you think? You got this in you? Anyone gonna step up and be Franklin Booth 2020? Who knows? Maybe it's the guy holding the camera. No, I don't think I could do this big of a body of work with this much detail. I actually like minimalistic art too, so although I'm nuts enough to do this, I'm not nuts enough to do thousands of pieces like this. These are great. I'm so glad that they posted these in this book, or printed them in the book, included them. Go through every version of what the word could be. Yeah, this is really, really interesting thing. And again, do you see? It's just this pencil shading and sort of the directions of it. So when he renders it out, he knows that he wants this value of darkness. Same here, but he may see some little pattern in here and just kind of go, "Oh, it looks kind of cool. Like, I'm going to keep that." And as long as the value, meaning the level of darkness, is spot on, it's good to go. Okay, this makes sense. Again, this is quite time consuming though, but really, really good. Well, kudos to this book. That's great. It's the Penguin. The Penguin, the Pope, and these dudes. Look at this. They give us stuff. Yeah, that's really nice. And fading into the thing. Oh man, dude, this is so sick. I didn't remember that this book had this stuff. We'll only have time to do this book, so we don't even need to concern ourselves with the other one. I can always come back and do it. And in fact, I think I've actually done both of these books before in another video. So if you actually look through my channel and search for Franklin Booth, there's a very, very good chance that you'll actually be able to find them. Okay, I'm going to end it because this video will cut out, and I don't want to have to edit this, so we'll end it on this piece right here.